Hello, wealth tycoons. Do you remember the kind of cell phones we had in the past? They looked like little guns. One could use a mobile phone to pin nails on the wall. Yes, those phones were no less than a hammer. But who designed mobile phones like that? Well, Nokia is the right answer. This company was the phone company for many years. Nearly everyone in the world had a Nokia when they were at their best. No one can see Nokia around anymore. So, this is not a success story. In this video, we will discuss the almost overnight disappearance of a global giant, a name that is as common as oxygen. Nokia was the leader in cell phones when they first came out. Their phones were everywhere in the early 2000s. People loved these phones because they were tough and dependable. The Nokia 3310 didn't seem to break when it was dropped, wet, or thrown around. Sometimes people use it for weeks without feeling any need to charge it. People fell in love with them just because of that. Nokia phones had fun designs and came in many colors. You could even change the faces on the phones. Also, who doesn't remember the old snake game? Back then, it looked like everyone had a Nokia. For years, they ruled the market with simple, strong phones. But Nokia had a big problem with its software, even though it was doing so well. Something called Symbian ran on their phones. Basic things like calls and texts worked fine, but viewing the web or using apps took a long time and were hard to understand. Nokia kept making their hardware better, but they didn't put as much effort into their software. Other tech companies began to see phones as more than just ways to make calls. They thought of them as small computers. But Nokia was not part of the club. They were sure that their loyal customers would always buy their phones, but didn't know how fast technology would overtake them. Their confidence changed into too much confidence over time. Some people in the company said it seemed like no one could beat them. They didn't want to change because the old ways worked. Leaders failed to plan because they were fighting over small things, like what color a button should be. The worst part is that Nokia made a touchscreen phone in 2004 called the Nokia 7710 many years before the iPhone. They gave up on the idea. At the time, touchscreens looked a bit pricey and risky. With smart apps, sleek looks, and fast internet, Apple and Google were building the future. But Nokia stuck to its old, simple style. Nokia didn't pay attention to the signs. While Nokia's competitors were getting ready for big changes, they were still selling a lot of phones. They thought the most important thing was having strong tools. Soon, software and user experience grew more important, and Nokia was not ready for this. Peacefully, their golden age was ending. Then 2007 came along and made a difference. The iPhone was something new that Apple made that shocked everyone. Apple was mostly known for computers and music players before that. Now, they made a sleek phone with no buttons and only a smooth touchscreen. When you could tap, touch, and zoom, your phone stopped being just a phone. You could take it around in your pocket like a small computer. A lot of people stood in line just to buy one. Nokia was still not worried at first. They laughed about it. Why would anyone want a glass phone that breaks easily? They pointed out. Our phones are strong! Lots of people love buttons. They thought the iPhone was just a cool tech toy for techies. Nokia was sure that their regular customers would stay with them. They kept making their strong phones with lots of buttons. They had to worry about more than just Apple. At about the same time, Google quietly released Android, a free OS that could be used on any phone brand. Soon, tech companies like Samsung and LG began making phones with touchscreens as well. Everybody could get these phones, which looked and worked just like the iPhone. All of a sudden, smartphones were everywhere. Through apps, you can do things like check your email, watch movies, and play games. Things had changed quickly in the phone world. Nokia didn't get it. Symbian was the old software that they kept pushing. It was slow, buggy, and not made for current apps or touchscreens. It was like running a race in flip-flops when I used it. The Nokia 5800, their first touchscreen phone, came out in 2008. But as soon as it came out, it felt old. It was slow and hard to use compared to the iPhone. Not many people like it. Nokia was behind the times. Internally, things began to go wrong with Nokia. Teams had to stay in meetings for hours on end and argue about silly things like the color or shape of phone buttons. They were too sure of themselves and took too long to make changes. They were sure they would figure out something, but they didn't. Google and Apple were making smart app stores and platforms, and Nokia tried to make its own. It was called OV. That didn't work. That was the worst mistake. Stephen Elop, who used to work at Microsoft, became CEO of Nokia in 2011. He made a very important choice. He worked with Microsoft to make Windows Phone instead of Android like most people do. To stand out is the goal, but Windows Phone didn't have many apps, and no one was excited about it. The outside of Nokia's new Lumia phones looked stylish and bright, but the inside felt empty. No Instagram, no Spotify. There were no must-have apps. Times have changed completely. A phone devoid of apps was not considered a phone at all. Samsung was having a great time while this was going on. They used Android, looked a bit like the iPhone, and ran a lot of ads. Samsung made the best phones in 2013. Whereas, Nokia's sales fell through the floor. A lot of people lost their jobs. Some factories shut down. A company that used to be in charge of cell phones was going out of business. But Nokia itself was the biggest threat, not Apple or Android. Because the company had done so well in the past, it became lazy. It was like a great sprinter who stopped working out and only showed off old medals. There were fights between teams inside the company instead of working together. Engineers were more interested in making phones that could work in snowstorms than in what regular people needed. Let me take a break and inform you that we have created an ebook for the top 100 businesses that you can start this year, and we will give away this ebook for free. Just comment on our video and I will share the link to download it. Let's get back to the video. The place of work became dangerous. Inside, people began calling this way of being stubborn the Nokia way. They said, "We don't follow trends, we make them." However, they were setting nothing. While their rivals built the future, they were just making small changes to old phones. One group even suggested that people move from Symbian to Android. The bosses were amused. Why should we give Google cash? We can fix Symbian. But Symbian was out of date. It was like racing a Tesla with an old broken car. It just couldn't keep up with how much they cleaned it up. Then came the big Microsoft deal, and that was the final nail in the coffin. Nokia's new CEO, Stephen Elop, went all in on Windows Phone. He called Nokia's old software, Symbian, a burning platform, and told workers they had to jump into the cold, unknown waters of Microsoft's system. But the thing is, hardly anyone was using Windows phones. Developers didn't care. Customers didn't care. Even people at Microsoft barely used them. Nokia spent millions advertising their new Lumia phones, bright colors, cool designs, but no one was excited. Where's Instagram? Why can't I find YouTube? People felt like they were being sold beautiful houses with no electricity or running water. At the same time, Android was exploding. Companies like Samsung and HTC were making fast, cheap, powerful phones. Everyone wanted one. Nokia's sales kept dropping. Stores stopped keeping Nokia phones. Investors got nervous. By 2013, the company was losing tons of money. Thousands of workers were laid off. Factories went quiet. The once great phone giant was fading fast. In 2014, Nokia sold its phone business to Microsoft for $7 billion. But it was already too late. Windows Phone didn't catch on. Microsoft lost billions and quietly shut it all down. Nokia's name disappeared from stores. Apple and Samsung had taken over. Nokia, once king of the phones, was now just a memory, like old pagers or fax machines. By 2013, things looked bad. Stores started hiding Nokia phones in corners, under stacks of shiny new iPhones and Samsung Galaxy. Sales crashed. Investors were angry. Employees walked around the office like zombies, knowing their jobs were at risk. Nokia became the punchline of tech jokes. Even Grandma didn't want a Nokia anymore. She wanted an iPhone to FaceTime her grandkids. If you are enjoying the video so far, it will be kind of you to give this video a like. Your one like can keep us motivated to keep posting such well-researched videos. Let's get back to the topic. The Lumia phones, Nokia's last shot, looked nice, sure. Bright colors, smooth shapes, but using them felt like walking through an empty mall. No useful apps, no excitement. Microsoft promised updates, but deep down, even their staff preferred iPhones. By 2014, the writing was on the wall. Microsoft had bought Nokia's phone division, but it felt more like a funeral than a fresh start. Within a few years, Microsoft gave up and called the $7 billion a loss. The Lumia phones disappeared. Just like that, Nokia's story in the phone world came to an end. The fall was hard for Nokia. Whole plants that used to make a lot of phones have shut down. Towns that relied on Nokia jobs began to have trouble. Engineers who had been making tough, dependable tools for years had nothing to do. Everyone in business should learn from Nokia's mistakes and not do the same ones. But Nokia didn't go away. They changed. They helped make 5G, internet networks, and tech that does things in the background these days. Some of their work is in the phone you're holding, but you might not notice. It would be like a rock star who used to play arenas but now writes catchy songs for toothpaste ads. Still doing work, just not the center of attention. Nokia teaches a huge lesson to people who refuse to acknowledge the change coming their way. Things can change very quickly, and it's not safe to get too used to things. Nokia had a lot of money, great employees, and a lot of users, but they kept doing things the same way. It was said inside the company, perhaps people want more than just a tough phone, but no one paid attention. They thought that the wins they had in the past would protect them. They put too much faith in the name and didn't notice how things were changing. Nokia knew that smartphones were the way of the future, which is pretty crazy. They even made some early ones. But those plans were shelved because of pride, fear, and company rules. Instead of taking risks, they decided to play it safe. Being safe can be the most dangerous thing to do in tech. It wasn't just a business loss when Apple beat Nokia. The whole tech world woke up to it. This company used to sell half of the world's phones. If they can lose everything all of a sudden, what does that say about the rest of us? A great boxer getting knocked out by a smaller opponent they didn't see coming is a lot like this. Tech changes quickly. It doesn't matter how well known or big you are. People who don't plan ahead are already behind schedule. Do you remember Blockbuster? Their faces lit up at Netflix. Kodak made the first digital camera, but they kept it a secret to protect their film business. Then lost everything. Sense a pattern? Nokia didn't fail because they were stupid. This happened because they were humans. They relaxed. They believed what they were saying. They thought that sellers would always have something that people wanted. It is not just about technology. People are involved in the story. It's human nature to stick with what works until it stops. If I could explain this whole situation in simple words, I would say, don't get married to your utility. Wed your purpose. Nokia believed that they were in the phone-making business. What they said was wrong. Their business was making connections. Smartphones were only useful for certain things. Their goal was lost when the tool stopped working. When they found it again, linking people through networks instead of devices, it changed their lives. No one can ignore the fact that there were times when Nokia ruled the cell phone industry. I am sure most of us had our first phones one of Nokia's only. Did you? Tell us in the comment section below. If you want us to cover any particular topic, leave it in the comment section and we will take it from there. Till then, you can check out our already existing gem of the videos.